Podcast, a platform created to entertain, educate, and evolve the modern-day deer hunter. Hey, Dan. How's it going?
It's going.
Going good or just going?
It's just going. Season's over. Starting to relax a little bit.
Are you?
Yeah. Finally get a haircut and shave. Maybe even take a shower.
That's all overrated stuff.
Right.
So you're done?
Yeah. Yeah, I ended yesterday.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're pretty much finished up here in Michigan too. I actually traveled down with my brother to Ohio this weekend. They have like a I think it's just a 4-day muzzleloader hunt, and he had an Ohio tag that he'd been trying to fill, and we went down there, and God, it was so bitterly cold that it was hard to sit, and we hooked up with some other guys that live down there and went and saw some new public pieces that my brother had never been to before, and we did a lot of still hunting and scouting, and God, we didn't come across the deer all day. But we're done pretty much here in Michigan, except for the Tri-County area that I live in. Actually, they're doing like an urban deer management, essentially trying to bring some of the numbers down in the Tri-County area where, the deer basically intermingle in urban areas. And they have a archery only, it's open all month actually. You can use your regular season tags, bucks, does. I know a lot of people were complaining about it potentially because, we get to the middle part of this month and a lot of bucks have dropped their horns and can be a little bit difficult to ID what you're actually shooting.
Yeah, they do a lot of that here too. They got a late doe season that really the majority of the people don't want. They just kind of shove it down our throats. And I talked to a biologist that works for the DNR, and he was telling me that I think it was something like 11% of the deer shot were antlered bucks that had shed.
Really?
And this is a doe-only hunt. And something like 40% were button bucks because there's stupid bucks that are kicked away from the does that are wandering around aimlessly right now.
Absolutely.
So half the deer shot on this doe hunt are bucks.
What are they doing? Just trying to knock the numbers down?
Yeah, they're not trying to knock the numbers down, but in my opinion, most of the places where they're doing it, they don't have the numbers to begin with anyways.
Interesting.
They want to make the numbers so ridiculously low that the hunting wouldn't be no fun. You wouldn't be able to get kids involved in it or anything.
Are they doing it in the name?
5 per square mile. In the name of CWD, but that's just an excuse. They wanted that before CWD. CWD was their excuse to get the numbers that low. And to put these stupid programs in place,
Yeah, it's interesting if you talk with a biologist what their opinion on it. There's a lot of mixed emotions and a lot of opinions on that stuff. The state of Michigan had a couple confirmed CWD cases now, and they're really starting to pop up around our state, and they're doing already some late seasons CWD control, and I can see the writing on the wall. It's going to be a lot of controversy here for the next, for the years to come, because that's a nasty disease for the deer herd to get, and it certainly can have a great impact. And
right, but there's one thing you really got to remember about it. Is there anything you can do about it? Is there anything you can do to stop that disease from taking its course once it's there?
Doesn't seem like
It
it.
gets into soil, it's there forever.
You know,
It You cannot get rid of it. You kill all the deer. If you bring the deer back, they'll get it.
right?
You there was a study done in Wisconsin where they were trying to prove to the people that by killing all these deer, they would stop the spread. And this woman did this research and tried to prove that. And what her research proved was the opposite. It proved that when you lower the number of the deer, the disease spreads outward faster
Really?
because the bucks get a bigger home range in lower deer densities.
That's an interesting concept. I never even thought about that. So they have to seek out outside of their normal core range what they would to breed, and in that case, they're transmitting the disease farther distances than what they normally would have.
Right. The core area doesn't get the numbers up higher faster, but the
Right.
disease spreads outward faster,
God, that's
which is the
interesting.
problem. I mean, that's what you want to avoid is the outward spread, but there's nothing we can do to stop it. The disease is going to wipe out deer eventually.
Yeah. It seems that way, man. It was scary. Somebody brought a point up to me this weekend or last weekend, and they had said that if you were to burn a deer's carcass, the ashes that land on the ground could contaminate another deer with CWD.
I wouldn't doubt it.
That's
Um, they
how.
took they took a deer farm that had CWD, um, and they made it no longer a deer farm because of it.
Hmm.
They went in there and they bulldozed the ground and poured gasoline all over everything and torched it.
Oh shit.
And they didn't. They were fighting this and to get deer again. They brought deer in there. They instantly got CWD from the soil.
God.
You can't stop it. I mean, it's all you can do is enjoy your hunting while you got it. But you got to remember, CWD's been out west longer than I've been alive,
Yeah, it
and
has.
they still have deer and they still have hunting. And you know what? They don't even care anymore. They don't check for it or anything anymore. They just gave up on it. And they still hunt. They still get deer. They still enjoy their hunting. The difference is they don't have the densities we have out here. So, the
Right.
DNR is trying to claim that if we got this high of a density, it'll spread so fast. And yeah, it is spreading a little bit fast over in west central Wisconsin where there's a high density, but it's here. You can't get rid of it. Might as well just live with it. There's also some other stuff that's interesting about it too. Is that there's been some studies that correlate it with clay-based soil that
Yep.
show that it really, where the clay-based soil is where the disease is, and you don't really see it up in the sandy soils.
I heard that.
Yeah. There's another thing too. I mean, this stuff can't be digested, so or it's not killed when it's digested. Let's put it like that.
Right.
So if a vulture, a hawk, an eagle, or some bird that's migrating eats this stuff and flies to New Mexico and takes a crap, or Canada, now they have CWD.
Yeah.
And here's another fact, and this shows you how these agencies aren't really caring too much about the disease. It's more about lowering deer numbers. They allow all these deer farms to sell urine. Urine has a small amount of the prions in it if it comes from those deer. So then they're
Certainly.
shipping it to different states, different countries even.
Yep.
This
No, I
urine
know.
that can have CWD.
Yeah. No, I know. It seems that seems pretty ridiculous. I stopped I stopped using that stuff for a two-part thing this year. One, I realized that it's never gotten me a deer and it's counterproductive, and two, I didn't want to be have the potential of releasing that anywhere I hunt, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I know. I talked to a biologist a while back. Actually, had him on the podcast. It's like one of our, I think it's like episode number 10 or whatever. The biologist for the state of Michigan, and yeah, man, I don't know what they do about it. But I know it's certainly gonna cause. Our state of Michigan has a lot of hunters and high hunter density, and that just comes with it. Controversy, everybody's got an opinion and A lot of people
Right.
want to do things one way and one the other, and I know this is going to be one that's going to be highly controversial, and there's going to be just a
Yeah.
lot of going back and forth on it, man.
That's why we never get nothing done over here. Is you bring up a point like trying to get this late doe season shut down, and there might be 10 guys that agree it should be shut down, but they all want to do something different. One of them wants to put it in January, one of them wants to do this, one of them wants to do that. And because you can't get on the same page as a group, you can't
Right.
stop it.
Yeah. Boy, that's a problem throughout our entire governmental system, isn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Never getting anything done. Everybody's just busy
Well,
arguing.
the problem is the politics in DNR agencies. I mean, I know some great people in the DNR, some biologists and stuff. I can't even quote them because they'll get fired if I quote what they've told me.
Yeah.
And I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
they
I
work
believe you.
for the government. The governor's their boss, and they've got politicians in place running it. And some of the politicians are against the governor. Some of them are for the governor. Some of them came in from the last governor, who was a different party. And there's all this turmoil in there, and a lot of it has to do with politics more than it does deer hunting. It'd be nice
Certainly.
if we separated the DNR from the government and made the chief of the DNR a voted position in itself.
Sure. That's what I was gonna say is here in our state, and I don't know if it's the same throughout all states or in Wisconsin, but in Michigan, obviously the Department of Natural Resources is responsible for managing the deer, but the deer farms are managed by the FDA,
Hmm.
not the
Yeah.
FDA. Um, God, they're managed by a different agency, and I can't think of what the hell the name of it is right now. But it's like whoever manages the agriculture. They're
Hmm.
responsible for overseeing the deer farm regulations. Is not the state. They work
Hmm.
closely together, but two separate entities. So well, this is kind of a interesting scenario that happened to us this year. We have this parcel that my father's part owner of up in northern Michigan. It's 120 acres, and on three sides of it, it's surrounded by public land, and on the fourth side of it, it's a private landowner who has, I think he has somewhere around 300 acres. Well, he high fenced the entire thing this year. We go up there in August, and he ran a 10-foot fence right down our entire uh, it would be our east property line, cutting off all deer movement, basically, east to west on our property. And he's been breeding deer for years and selling them, I assume, to game ranches and stuff. But he's going to have a high fence, it looks like a high fence hunting operation, literally right next to what was our Big Woods property up in northern Michigan. Man, it was pretty disheartening.
Hmm.
And my brother brought that up. He's like, well, we'll probably have CWD up here a little sooner, possibly, than we planned on, but
Yeah.
definitely has that potential. Well, I don't think I should take you too deep into the waters of getting you started talking politics, so we should probably change the subject.
Right.
Well, you helped the state out, at least in one regard, take a deer out. I saw you took one out with your truck.
Yeah, I got one with the truck. I was only going 40, but it still took out my front end. It seemed like it committed suicide, didn't it? You saw the video, didn't you?
I saw the video. You always run a
Yeah,
dash
like it
cam?
ran into me. Yeah, I do. I run a dash cam at all times.
No kidding.
The
When
same
did you
kind the
start?
cops use. Yeah, it just revolves.
Why, and when did you start doing that?
Uh, Carol got that for me for a gift. I think it was last year. As a matter of fact, she bought it for me, and before I installed it, I wiped out the truck.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, the thing works great. It it's really good clarity. I've actually done scouting with it, where I had a nice 10-pointer run in front of me, and was able to go back, slow down the footage, and just on my way to work,
Right.
and look at which buck it was, and okay, that's that buck hanging in this area.
No
Okay,
kidding. So
Yeah,
what does it turn on when you turn your truck on? It just automatically starts recording and then does it save
yeah. It's got a looping system, so you put a giant card in there, and one that's got a lot of space. And I went back and looked for things, and I've got footage that goes back for probably 2 months.
oh wow.
Yeah, and it just keeps looping over the oldest one.
You're like the second person I know personally to have one of those, and both people now that things come in handy. A guy that I worked with had one in his service van, and he
Hmm.
was actually in a car accident in his service van where the police ended up writing him a ticket, and through that dash cam, he was able to prove that he was not responsible for the accident and
Right,
get out of the ticket.
right. That's a big part of it. It not only that, it records everything that's said.
Right.
It has my speed on it. It has my GPS location. Everything's right on there. So
Huh.
I'm not, I would always be honest and upfront, and if I did something wrong, I'd pay the price. But I don't think everybody else is like that. And it's nice to have a record of what goes on around you. You know,
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, that's and yeah, you're right. It was good video quality. I mean, anybody that wants to see it can go to your YouTube page and what's it? I think you were what's it labeled? I was attacked or
extreme whitetail tactics, or the that show,
yeah. What was the title of the video clip?
attacked on my way to work.
Yep. Yeah, you're not kidding. That thing did like really square up with you, and it was probably one of
Yeah,
those 5 degree below mornings. That's what I would do. I'd run out in front of a car if I had to live in that shit.
yeah, it's been pretty cold lately, hasn't it? Oh,
God, it's been brutal, man. Has that like kept you out of the woods at all, or have you been pretty adamant
no,
on not
hell
letting the temp?
no.
Yeah,
Let me tell you something. That's the best time of the year to hunt
I want to get
for
into that.
for really big bucks. I was out there in all that brutal cold. I mean, that one day it was like 10 below. I actually got frostbite bite on a portion of my finger.
Oh man.
I mean, that's how dedicated I am to being out there. But I probably got to get some actual warm clothes because just wearing two pairs of pants and 7 t-shirts and a sweatshirt ain't cutting it.
No, yeah, you probably need to
It was
upgrade your
pretty cold.
gear. I did that last year. I got a good layering system, like in, all the new modern technology clothing. And I went out 2 weeks ago, New Year's weekend. My brother and I went up to northern Michigan, and we went out Sunday morning, and the air temperature without the wind chill was 16 below,
Hmm.
and I was able to sit for 3.5 hours,
That's pretty
and
good.
the first 2 hours I was comfortable. I mean, like comfortable. The half an hour following that, I got cold. The half an hour following that, I was in survival mode. So,
Yeah, I
but
can last about 2 hours. That's about it.
yeah, yeah, I
But
was.
our peak movements are just before dark too. But I have to say that one day uh, when it was really cold, I pushed it so I didn't get out there till the last like an hour before sunset. When
Yeah.
I got there, I kicked 2 bucks that were walking past, and I think one of them was the target buck. So
So, so you preluded to what I want. One of the things I wanted to talk about, and the extreme cold temperatures. You just said that that's one of the best times to be hunting.
mhm.
Why do you why do you think that?
Well, late season is the best time to pattern big bucks and
Hmm.
to get real big bucks to move in daylight. It's better
Hmm.
than rut. Giant bucks, the kinds that are like 4 or 5 years old, pressure situations, do not go running around chasing does all over the place like people think they do. They make a mistake or two, but not like the younger bucks. And even early season, it's hard to get on them, and it's hard to pattern them or get them on a specific pattern. Late season comes and they go in survival mode and they get on food sources. They pack up, get in groups, and they bed close to food. And all you have to do is get it, in between that bedding and food, and it can be golden. I got on a lot of good bucks this year. My best hunt was in the last couple weeks.
Do You mean like crop fields or what type of food
Well,
in general?
it
I
could be
mean,
all kinds of stuff. Like the stuff I was really hunting the most was dogwood.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
recently, it was an area without a lot of crops, but it had dogwood, and all the deer were going to this dogwood area and feeding in there. And actually, they were in the dogwood or in a tamarack swamp coming into the dogwood. And then when the swamp froze, they migrated up to high ground and started coming in from a whole different direction.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, Saturday, no Friday, Sunday was yesterday was the last day of the season. Sunday and Friday, I was planning because of the wind a hunt for this real big 10-pointer I was getting pictures of, and I went in for the kill and I had him walk right past and I almost got him. And it was a 160-inch buck and best opportunity I had the whole year.
He slipped through your fingers.
Yes, he did. I had a lot of deer around me. They were all coming from all directions to eat in that dogwood, and you know, there's some downfalls to late season too, obviously, with the cold and stuff, being
Oh yeah,
overdressed, being bundled, things not working the way they should because of how bitter cold it is. Because, I mean, we're not just talking chilly here. I mean, it's been sub-zero
yeah.
weathers, you know.
Yep.
So I know I can't move because there's no leaves, no cover, you know. So when the buck came walking underneath me, it was right at last light. It was getting a little low light. Um, I got this thing where I aim a bow at the target and I slowly pull it back, so there's very little movement, you know, kind of not shifting
Mhm.
around. I get it anchored, and he stops quartering away, and I could just see this little like leaf limb in between me and him that's kind of graying out with the light fading.
Mhm.
And what I should have did is let him take a couple more steps, and it'd have been mine. Just been patient. But I got the stupid idea with him quartering away like that, with it being a perfect shot angle, to just try to slip up 6 inches and try to sit up a little bit, you know, like stand up a little bit.
Yes.
And one of the deer off to the side of me saw me, spooked, and ran. And then I tried to rush a shot, and I actually did shoot just as the deer bolted. And luckily, the shot missed because it probably would have wounded it. It probably came close to wounded it, but it was a clean miss.
Hmm. Yeah, I concur with everything you're saying. The equipment, the deer just function better than we or the equipment can at those kind of temperatures.
Yeah. Well, it was Saturday, the next day. I went back out there, went to the same spot. I knew that buck wasn't going to come back in, but I was going to give it a chance anyways. You know, because
Hmm.
he didn't see me. He didn't know what happened, I didn't think. Just one deer saw me, and they all spooked. So I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. I mean, it's a shot in hell, but, you know, you know, otherwise I'm done. This little area, I could go in there, you know. So I gave it a shot. I went in there, and right at last light, some deer came through and they're acting really spooky, and it was just small bucks and does. And I decided right on the buzzer to shoot a doe. I had a doe tag for the area, so I had a doe come in. I pulled back the bow real slow, and at about 3/4 of a draw, it fired on its own
Oh man.
and actually hit the deer, which is bad. Wounded it. I tracked it and never found it. It went about a half mile. I don't even know where I hit it. When I got home, I looked at my release. It was a ball of ice. So from taking that thing in and out of the house in my pocket of my safety vest,
Yeah.
it got condensation and froze up on me.
Right.
See, it's stuff you don't really expect, you know. But you gotta check that equipment out. You gotta keep your stuff outside when it's cold, you know. And
Yep.
you know, one little error can cost you. You know, one little thing you don't think about, you know.
Yeah, and the deer are pretty on edge that time of year too. I don't know if it's just in general for predation and if those super cold temperatures just kind of screw with them a little bit where they're already kind of worked up. Boy, man, they will not accept any nonsense. If you make a single noise, it's like they are gone.
You know, once they know they're being hunted, it's hard.
So
One of the
when
big things with the late season thing is a lot of guys are probably listening to this going, what the heck? I can't get on anything at this time of the year.
Right.
Well, you do have to do a lot of scouting, and it's hard with these short days. I mean, a lot of times you get out of work, it's blackout,
Yeah.
at this time of the year, for most people's schedules
Right.
because of how short the days are. But if you get out and you do a lot of scouting, you find the deer because they're not always in the same spots year after year in the late season. They're where the food is, and you have to
Right.
go find them. And I had to cover a lot of ground. On the way home, I drive around all the different public areas on the way home from work, and I would check out different areas. I ended up, I had two spots where I had real good bucks. I put cameras in, and I picked up a really nice 10-pointer at the little farm that I hunt near my house. And he was coming in quite a bit into a food plot, actually in daylight, but a lot of deer were. But he never showed up anytime I hunted. And then there was the one by the Conservancy, which is where all these bucks were, and I had 4 different trophy bucks coming in there, but I had probably 30-some bucks coming and eating in that dogwood, and it was unreal how many deer were coming in. And then the trouble with that is when you get these big groups of deer, and you got no leaf cover or anything, try doing anything without getting busted.
Yeah. No, it's
But getting on them is a lot easier. Getting onto the big stuff.
right.
It's
Well,
just getting
snow
it done is
helps too.
harder.
Snow helps too,
Yeah,
right? I
oh
mean,
yeah.
are you utilizing
Well, that's
snow to
mostly
find
what I was doing
tracks?
is driving around the public looking at the tracks coming in and out of the food sources. You
Right.
know?
Right. That's what I've been doing. I'll even go check a camera in the morning after a snow, and if I see there was a big buck on there, I'll follow his tracks right back to where he's going and at least have an idea for next year. If I can't get on him this year, at least next year, I know generally, potentially, that him or another mature deer could be there.
Right? Yep.
I've been utilizing that a whole lot. I just went last night. I was actually out last night until like 6:30, out in the dark, covered a couple miles and hung 4 cameras. And once season's over here, you can't bait, and the deer numbers aren't great. I mean, you could set a trail camera up on out in the woods, and you could go back in a month and not have a photo on it. I mean, it's only because you should have had it 10 foot one way or the other. The snow really helps figure that out. So I went
Yeah.
out last night and put the camera up on a couple trails that are pretty beat down. One to inventory deer, and 2, if I can go right after a fresh snow and ID that, yeah, a nice, what buck was in here last night and pick his track up, I can follow that thing right back to where he's going and potentially have an idea what he'll be doing this time next year.
Sure, yeah.
Um, yeah, I was just gonna say that when I was out there last weekend, I said I sat for the first 2 hours real comfortably. Well, I got a big hat pulled down to my, basically over my eyebrows, right down to my eyes, and then I've got like a neck warmer pulled right up underneath my eyes, and they overlap each other on my ears. And with the snow, blanket of snow on the trees and stuff, you can't hear anything as it is. So I know I got to be sitting dead still, right? Because if a deer comes in just out of my peripheral vision, I am not going to hear him. And if I move, the whole thing's over. So I sat dead still for the first hour. I did not move a muscle. And after an hour, my butt was getting a little sore. I thought I'd shift around a little bit. My gloves were frozen solid to my bow, and my release on my other hand was frozen solid to my glove, and my ass was frozen solid to my seat. I couldn't have moved a muscle without. I mean, it made so much noise, when ripping that stuff off of there. If a deer had come in, I would have been rendered completely useless at all.
Yep.
So I learned that lesson a little bit. Boy, you can't just be sitting there like a statue because you will just literally freeze up. And probably about 30 minutes after that, my first move, I had a deer come in right out in front of me, and I had a doe tag, and it was what looked like a decent sized doe. It could have been a nice button buck. It was kind of hard for me to tell, but it was 20 yards in front of me. It was an absolute chip shot. I had the bow up, and as soon as I put just a little bit of tension to pull back my bow, it was like that bow was just frozen in a time capsule. It made the limbs made noise, the cams made noise, everything made just a little bit of noise, and with the snap of a finger, that deer was at 60 yards. And I was just like, man, this is next to impossible when it's this cold. But I saw deer all day, and my cameras said the same thing. I pulled camera cards last night after all this, 2 weeks of extreme sub-zero temperatures. Lots of deer activity. Before this cold spell, it was pretty much all nighttime stuff. When this cold hit, it was all day, every day, 30
Yeah.
minutes, every
Yeah.
hour. I mean, they were hitting food. They were up and moving.
Oh yeah.
And I know a lot, like you just said, a lot of guys say, "Man, I can't see a deer this time a year to save my life." Well, I think part of that is it can be somewhat hard to find motivation this time of year after you've been hunting for a couple months
Right.
for right. So it might
Right.
a little effort
You
could
know, you go out in the woods, and you know as well as I do, you go out right now, and there ain't nobody out there.
nobody.
Nobody. I
Yep.
mean, that conservancy, you got to draw for hunts, and there's people that drew December. I mean, they had to work to draw those spots, and they're not even showing up. And I'm walking through their units to get to mine and thinking, wow, I wish I was hunting here. And there's nobody showing up to hunt, and there's guys with permits to hunt there.
Right.
You know, it gets cold like that, and they go ice fishing, or they just give up, or they quit. And it seems like as soon as the gun ends, it's just like your average go-lucky guys just quit. They
Yeah.
lose their motivation. You know,
Right.
well, most guys are rut hunters. You know, you don't see too many guys early season two, and you see a little more then because people are gung ho to get out there. They're
Yeah.
anxious and anticipating, but they're really rut hunters. You know, they're not out there in this stuff.
Right.
You know, it's the diehard guys you run into now, the serious guys.
Yeah.
You know,
I've been putting a lot of thought into the last couple of years. I've been successful the end of December, and I think that going forward, I'm going to focus less time and effort in the month of October and more in the months of late November and all through December, really.
you know, I focus all season, and it's just differences on how I focus. You know,
Yeah.
I just did in my journal. I don't know if you've watched that on the Beast, but I got a journal where I post every day's hunt.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of it, I did a little where I put everything together, like the stats. Out of 107 days available, I hunted 66 days.
Good.
What was it? I think 68 bucks I seen and 128 does.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
20 days that where I didn't see a deer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of interesting that most of those days were earlier in the season, and that my best hunts were late season.
Yeah. That's same for
My
me.
best hunts for big stuff. I mean, I've seen a lot of decent deer, and deer I'd shoot during rut, but the real big stuff the last couple of weeks here.
So focusing on just on late season, because that's kind of fresh on my brain and what we're coming off of. How are your strategies for scouting changing? I know you mentioned red brush. I'd like to elaborate on that just a little bit because that's something that I pay close attention to now. But like for guys that aren't, you see on deer hunting TV, here's exactly what they're going to tell you and what I was told for years. Do not waste any of your time in the mornings this time of year. You just need to be on your food plot the last hour of light. Well, that style of hunting is not available to, a large population of deer hunters. So for guys that are hunting big woods and don't have access to big ag fields, what are deer looking for food sources this time of year?
Well, it can vary quite a bit. I mean, I find it's browse, it's dogwood and stuff, and you're in big woods, and you got to go kind of out and find out what they're looking at. I'm looking for in big woods clear cuts and stuff that are growing back in with small brush, and you'll see the deer yarding up. I'm looking for swamps that got dogwood in them, things like that. I'm going to drive around and I'm going to find tracks. And if you're in an area where there's good food, there's going to be a lot of tracks.
Right.
The closer you get to that food, the more it's going to pick up. So if you're going through a desert of snow and there's no tracks, keep it at about 40 or 50 miles an hour until you start hitting tracks. You know?
Right.
So that's what you got to do is really get out and scout. Because everybody likes to be an expert or something and say, oh, they're digging up acorns, they're just hitting the dogwood, or they're just on these cornfields, or they're just hitting young and poplar trees in this cutover. But really, you don't know until you go look. I've seen them
Right.
hit plants. I don't even know what that plant is, but you go out and you find it.
R-
I
right.
do know you're not going to find much of anything in open hardwoods. You got to get into something thick, brushy, usually. You know,
Right.
um, I mean, anybody can find deer around crops or standing crops, but to find them in the woods is kind of tough at this time of the year. But you just got to put the miles on. You got to scout. And here's the thing too: is a guy, he'll say, "Oh yeah, I got 2 days to hunt." So he'll plan, well, maybe they're over here, and he'll go hunt over there. And then he'll come back and go, it's a waste of my time. I didn't see no deer. There's no tracks, no nothing. And the next day he goes, okay, now I got to get something because I only got 1 day left. And he goes to this other area, same thing.
Right.
Really, if he would have took 1 day and drove around, he could have covered a lot of territory and had one good hunt out of
Right.
those 2 days.
Yeah.
But everybody has this pressure on them for some reason where they think they got to hunt every day they're out there.
I get that.
You really need to spend more time scouting and making sure you're in the right position so that you're seeing deer when you are hunting,
Right.
rather than just sitting there staring at a squirrel or something.
Well, deer too, like annually, really carry the same patterns too. So the scouting you're doing this year I mean, it's not
Yes and
exactly
no.
for
I
certain.
see that a lot in the earlier starts of the year, but this time of the year it does vary because food sources will change.
Yeah.
Um, a new area gets cut in the big woods. Something pops up. Some acorn drop is so heavy there's still acorns under the snow or something.
Right.
Um, Something can change from year to year with that food source. But if you do see a pattern, that's where I'd start checking when I go out scouting. I
Yeah.
check there first. And there are areas that I know around here, swamp areas on public, that every year, year after year, there's big bucks in their late season. But it's not everywhere. I wouldn't want to portray that to somebody, that it is.
How careful? I mean, you're talking about scouting something and then potentially hunting it the next day. What kind of proactive measures are you taking so when you're going in there, you're not blowing the spot up for a
Well,
month?
the big thing with me is usually I know the area already.
Yeah.
I know all the public land around me and stuff, so I'm going and I'm checking on stuff. When I see tracks, I know where they're coming from. I know where they're at, and that's a huge advantage.
Right. Right.
If you're going out and you're going into a spot you've never been in there before, you find a track, the food source or something, then you kind of backtrack. You kind of got to guess where they're coming from.
Yep.
And once you've gotten in there, you probably should hunt that day.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
But for me, a lot of times I can go out and check on something without boogering it because I know where the deer are coming from, I know where they're going to, and I'm just checking to see if they're active.
Sure. Yeah, I get that. Have you ever paid attention much to something that caught my eye this year? Tornado blowdowns, like paid attention to in the summer where areas have real bad storms or multiple tornado
Mm-hmm.
touchdowns, and then gone in there that year and seen that there would be a bunch of, it just changes the whole landscape real heavily. And what I noticed is two, it creates bedding cover, or one, it creates bedding cover, and two, there's going to be some new growth. And I found a couple tornado blowdowns where there's deer and bucks held up in those.
Sure. Yeah. I've only seen two of what you just described in my life, actually.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a rarity. But I seen one guy where he hired me to scout his farm, and he had a whole ridge that a tornado went through,
Yeah.
and it was apparent bucks were bedding in it. Most of the big stuff was bedding on the edges, and it was hard to tackle because there's really no trees and stuff.
Mhm.
But if it's so thick a buck can't get through it, you're not going to be in the middle of it.
Right.
It depends on the situation, but it certainly is going to create a lot of food
Yep.
by ripping those trees over and having new growth. And right after it happens, they're going to be in there eating the tops of the trees and stuff too.
Right. Yeah, I found two different spots this year where that had happened, where there had been tornadoes that had touched down, and it's just as good as a clear cut almost, except for it leaves everything, and the deer seem to hold right up in it or around it, and because like you just said, if it's so thick nothing can get through it, a deer can't get through it. Well, typically neither can coyotes, and I think they like that they can lay up on one side of that and watch their front and not have to worry
Right.
about something coming from the
That's the one
backside.
thing that gets me with deer when you bring up coyotes.
Yeah.
Um, the late season deer. The one thing that gets me is that their bedding patterns change quite a bit right at the end, because these marshes and swamps freeze up, and the main reason they're bedding in those marshes and swamps is to get away from coyotes. Now
Mm.
coyotes can get across it. Deer don't like slipping on the ice. They don't like all the leaves being gone from all that low brush, and now they're sitting out in the bare sun, and they start coming up on that high ground, where so it kind of throws me off sometimes. Where I'm always expecting them to come out of the swamps, but they're a lot of times they're moving up into pines or something where you wouldn't expect them to chirp out to bed, but they'll do that in late season,
Boy, I didn't even
especially when it's bitter cold.
think about that. Yeah, they love having that protection from the water from the coyotes, but yeah, as soon as it's frozen up, it's kind of in the coyotes' favor versus the deer.
Right. They hate it when it's thin ice out there and they're putting their feet through it too. Where like the
Hmm.
coyotes can run over it, but they're putting their feet through, cutting their legs, and they can hardly move in the stuff.
Yeah. I told you I was in Ohio this weekend on some public land,
Hmm.
and we pushed a couple big swamps, marshes, and I would get to, there was a lot of deer tracks all through these, but I would get to spots where there was like no deer tracks where I would think there would be deer tracks, and I would be like, "What? I wonder why not here." And then all of a sudden, boom, I'd go through the ice, and it's like
Here you go.
those deer knew that area. They must, know that area and know better than to go over there because there's a thermal pocket or something for some reason. And I figured that out real quick. If there's not deer tracks here, I probably shouldn't be going that way. I went through a couple times actually, and going through the ice when it's 5 below out, not super pleasant.
So how did your season go this year? You knock anything down or
I did exactly what you told me to do. I got after it and punched a couple tags. I
good?
the late firearm season. I guess it would have been maybe like November, boy, 28th, possibly. There was only a couple days left in our gun season. Our gun season ends December 1st, and I went out that morning, and it was a real still, quiet morning. And I had a couple deer come through right at first light, and then I kind of sat the rest of the well, I sat for a couple hours before I saw anything, and I had a couple coyotes come through, and they went off towards a different way, and then oh, I don't know what it was, an hour later or something, I catch something moving, and I look, and it's a good buck, and kind of getting towards. Like you said, this time of year, later in the year, the days are real short, right? So, like 11 o'clock in the morning is kind of like the middle of the day. And I'm wondering why this buck is up by himself middle of the day. He's not chasing a doe or anything, and I'm wondering if the coyotes went into this bedding area and bumped him out of there. But regardless of why he was up and on his feet, he went into another bedding area, an area that I had scouted back in March, where I had ID'd one lone bed in there that I figured a mature buck would be probably held up in during the deer season. And I hunted that bed a handful of times and never saw anything come in and out of it. But I saw him go in there, and in the past, I think I probably would have tried to set up on his exit that evening and tried to catch him coming out of there. But my thought process was just like, he's probably not going to move until after dark, and the temperatures were kind of mild. There was no reason that I thought that he'd be getting up any earlier than dark, especially with the pressure around this particular area. And I had some family coming over and stuff that was going to kind of complicate me getting back out there in the evening. So I thought, you know what, man, I'm going for it. I'm just going to try to follow him in there and see if I can kill him in his bed on the ground. And that's exactly what I did. I got within about 60 yards of him, and it was still and quiet. It was the worst conditions possible for trying to stalk in on a deer. It was dry, crunchy leaves mixed with some water that he was surrounded with. I couldn't get in there without being making noise. And so when I was within about 60 yards, the only thing I had in my favor was I did have the wind in my face perfectly. So I was just taking my time, working through there. I got to about 60 yards, and he heard me, and he got up. But I'm in full camo from head to toe, except for a orange hat, which is required by law for gun hunting. I have to have something on that is visible 360 degrees. But besides that hat, I'm in full camo. And there's like marsh reeds and some thick stuff laying on the ground. And he was looking hard trying to see me, but he could not pick me up through that stuff. And so he started working a little bit away from me, and I would get the gun up, but I couldn't get him in the scope. I couldn't find him in the scope. I'd put the gun down. I'd relocate him. I'd pick the gun back up. There'd be stuff in the way. I just couldn't get a clear shot at him. So he he was working basically straight away from me, and my thought process was his bedding area is pretty small. He's probably not going to want to leave this security cover in the middle of the day. It's probably the last thing he wants to do. So I made the decision to try to sound like a deer, and I got down with my grunt call, and I hit a couple young buck tending grunts and started raking some leaves and breaking some sticks, and then I got a doe call out, hit that a couple times, and just made a bunch of racket, man. And then, like you had kind of told me, if you give it time, those deer will kind of forget about that, and they'll go about, their day. And so I just sat down for 30, 40 minutes and waited. And then I got back up and I proceeded to go into where I had saw him go into. I can't see him this entire time, but it's pretty small, little thick stuff. I didn't see him go out either side, so I'm pretty confident he's in there. And when I got within about, I'd say, 40 yards, he knew something was seriously wrong, and he jumped up and he ran out of there. And he made the mistake of, well, I don't know that he made the mistake. I think he stopped as soon as he got out of there, and he felt that he was a comfortable distance from me to kind of look back and observe and see exactly what I was, and to kind of look ahead of him and decide what direction he wanted to go into. And luckily for me, I was gun hunting and not bow hunting, and he was at 80 yards, and I shot him and dropped him. So he ended up
Cool.
being 3.5-year-old, 120-inch buck, which is the nicest buck that I've ever taken here in the state of Michigan. So, dude, I
Nice.
was, I was the level of anxiety that I had going through that scenario made me physically sick. I I did not throw up, but I felt like I could have. Just it must have been the amount of adrenaline that my body had going through it. I'd never been in close quarters with a deer of that size on the ground when I was actively hunting, and man, it was badass. Like as we were walking around all weekend, this through the woods, that just kept replaying in my head, man. Seeing a buck stand up and being on ground level with him, a deer of that caliber, it was an awesome experience. I'll never forget it. It's going to be a highlight of my hunting career throughout my entire life. I can tell it was just awesome, man. And unfortunately, I did hit him high on my first shot. I hit him in the spine and I dropped him. And I had to take a follow up shot, and he was moving around, and it was through a bunch of brush. My second shot, it didn't connect with him. And then I realized basically what was going on, that he wasn't going anywhere. And I closed the distance to about half, and got up there and put one through his lungs. And just watched him expire and went right over there and just got my hands on him. And man, I couldn't have been more thrilled to have to drag 200 pounds through a mile of nasty shit. It was so worth it.
Yeah, I know a few of my best gun kills kind of ended the same way. I mean,
Yeah.
sneaking up on them in their bed is a rush. You know, anybody who says they just bow hunting and they don't gun hunt anymore, that there ain't no challenge to it. You should try that. Sneaking up on them in their beds. That's a riot.
God, do I agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. It is. That's
One
the
thing I
biggest.
learned, the biggest failure I used to have with it, because I used to do that a lot. You know, I got that giant non-typical. My highest scoring buck was I crawled up on its bed. My biggest typical, I snuck up on him bedded. What I learned in the years of doing that was that if you try going nose to wind straight at them from downwind, you usually bust you because that's the place that they're the most vulnerable. So they're staring that way. They set themselves up to watch downwind
Mhm.
and smell behind them. So the best thing you can do, if anybody wants to try that, is to come at them quartering from upwind where your wind doesn't hit them, but you're coming in from upwind, kind of, quartering to
Mhm.
them.
Mhm.
That way they're not looking in your direction because they always look downwind until they hear something. Then they can swivel their head around and look at you real fast. But as long as you're
Right.
quiet, coming in from a quartering angle is the best.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely all in on that now because, like I said, that was the I'd never dealt with that level of adrenaline. Obviously, having seen him, I mean, I knew the deer was there for, geez, before I killed him, a
Hmm.
solid hour, maybe an hour and a half. So I was just this progressive, slow build. And God, by the time I shot that deer and got up to him, man, I thought I was gonna puke. Just body just didn't even know how to deal with it. But God, that was awesome. I get excited just talking about it right now. And the that was the end of November, and then I did a little more hunting here and there. But I kind of backed off a couple of my spots, being I was gonna basically throw all my chips in on the later part of the muzzleloader hunting season.
Hmm.
And what I was waiting for was some weather. We got hit with some milder temperatures there the beginning of December. There wasn't any snow. It was kind of mild. I went out a couple times, man. I did not see a single deer. And around us too, a lot of people like to shoot recreationally. And
Hmm.
when the temperatures are mild like that and the weather's kind of nice later part in the year, it seems like a lot of guys don't have anything better to do than to sit on the back of their deck and drink some beer and just fire off round after round after round. And I don't know, man. I think the deer just get on edge because of that, and people have been hunting them, but I did not see any deer until that weather turned. And when we started getting some colder temps and we started getting some snow, uh, I kind of got back into it. And then I would have been around December 20th, I think. We had a morning where it had snowed. We had a front move in that evening, and it had snowed all night. And it was snowing. They were calling for the heaviest part of the snow, basically, to be from like 8 o'clock in the morning till noon. It was so hard to get out of bed, but I thought in my head, I was like, man, it's just going to be a really pretty morning to be out there in the woods. I'll enjoy that even if I don't see any deer. And what I'll do is, if I'm not seeing anything, I'll probably get down mid-morning and just scout for a couple hours because there's fresh snow and there will be fresh tracks. I'll be able to see what happened overnight. And first thing right before I'm hunting a bedding area, hoping I'm catching deer coming back to bed within legal shooting light. And right 30 minutes before legal shooting light, right when it's starting to turn gray light, deer kind of started piling back in. And about an hour after I could see good, I saw a deer just working through the timber, right? Like you said, all the leaves are down, there's snow on the ground. Through the timber, I could see shit 100 yards. And I saw a deer working through there. and it looked like he had his nose to the ground and he was just moving. I thought, it's probably a young buck, but about 30 minutes later, 45 minutes later, I saw a movement coming back from the direction that he had went in, and I got the gun up in the scope, and it was about 100 yards, and it was it was a deer. He didn't have a big rack, but he had a big body. I could tell he was, or I assumed he was a little bit of an older deer. He had a real wide rack. Actually, he ended up being like 2 inches wider than the 120-inch deer that I shot. And I made the conscious decision that I was gonna kill him. I've been trying to kill a doe to put another deer in the freezer. I hadn't been able to. I had limited weekends left where I knew I was going to be able to hunt, and I made the decision I was going to shoot him. And as he kept coming through, he kept looking more and more appealing. And it was just a picture perfect morning, man. The snow was flying, and he got to about 75 yards, and he was getting to where he was going to start to get into my scent. He was kind of starting to cut behind me, and I took a brisket shot on him at 75 yards, and I hit him a little high, but I dropped him dead in
Mm.
his tracks. And he's an awesome looking buck, and he was over 200 pounds as well, 3.5-year-old deer. So that was it, man. I punched both my buck tags. I'm still would like to shoot one more deer to make a bunch of summer sausage and maybe give away to some friends that weren't fortunate enough to kill a couple deer this year. But my freezer's full. I got 2 nice skull mounts to get done now and put up on the wall, and I learned a shit ton this season. Like, man, I really, really learned a lot deer hunting this year.
Yeah, sounds like you're really progressing this year.
I feel like it. I mean, a
Good things in the
combination of,
future for you.
yeah, I mean, there's a combination of spending time talking with guys like you and other guys that have been, listening to, or listening to people that have been doing it and processing the information, and then just going out there and spending time and making your brain work, like you said. Why did that happen? Like, really, really digging into it deep. What's going on? Why did that happen? Why was that deer on his feet? Why was
Exactly.
that why was that mature deer on his feet after
Right.
dark? Or when all the guys tell me, when all the TV programs and stuff always say this time of year, do not waste your time with mornings. Don't do it. I went out there in the morning. I killed a damn nice buck. Well, a lot of people were having coffee and eggs in the warmth of their own house. Why
Yeah.
did it happen? Do you do you take any stake in or pay any attention to, like, mid to late December when does potentially come back into estrus?
So I can tell you, Friday night when I had all those bucks underneath me, the big one was sparring with another one I couldn't see very well, but it had to be a good sized buck to spar with him. And I had two bucks chasing a doe around in circles around by me, and there's a scrape there being
Yeah.
used. And that was just Friday,
Yeah.
3 days ago.
When we were up north over New Year's, there was a trail that I walked in to look at an area. There was 3 scrapes that had just been ripped up. I mean, they just got ripped up. And we're talking, December 30th. I'm really starting to take a lot of thought into focusing my efforts in that.
When the more I look at rut, the more I see that you start getting rut activity in mid October, and you got your peaks and your valleys, but it just seems to always be petering out there, until they lose their antlers, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I well, from my understanding is that if a doe doesn't get bred when she first comes into heat, whatever those first, you know, that
Hmm.
cycle in November, that with around 3 or 4 weeks, she will recycle into heat.
Hmm.
And I believe that the doe fawns, the 6 month old fawns, some of them will potentially come into heat for their first time, but it won't happen until the middle of December.
Yep.
And the buck I killed last year was December 18th, and he was chasing does hard. And I think this buck that I killed, this muzzleloader buck that I killed, I'm very confident that he was scent checking the trails in and out of this bedding area, seeing if there was any signs of any hot does going in and out of there. I don't know what else he'd be doing mid morning, being on his feet like that.
Yeah.
What about fronts this time of year? Like, do you think that the snow, do you take that into account at all? Like, if there's weather
Oh yeah.
fronts?
Yeah, I watched it on my cameras. I mean, those big bucks. Every time there's a snowstorm came through, that they were on camera in daylight,
Yeah.
like clockwork.
Yep. I saw the same exact thing.
Yeah, and they know when a snowstorm's coming in a front. And then what was nice about that is the snow fronts. A lot of times those were warmer air. You
Yes.
could bear the hunting a little better.
Yep. Yeah, and it's just, I mean, a lot easier to see deer out there, right? when there's
Oh yeah.
when everything's white. Yeah, I would have
Yep.
never seen if there wasn't snow on the ground. I would have never saw that buck the second one that I shot. There's no way in hell the distance that he was and the area that he was in. If there hadn't been a blanket of white stuff on the ground, I just wouldn't have seen him. It was a picture perfect hunt. That's the other thing I love about late season is just the landscape, man. Like you said, you got the whole place to yourselves. I mean, you're hardly hearing gunshots. People aren't going outside, especially some of the areas that I hunt. I won't say they're urban, but they're not backcountry by any means. So, kids aren't out playing. Uh, it's just a lot quieter, and I think that makes the deer more comfortable too. They just kind of recognize that people aren't out and about, and maybe they potentially feel a little safer.
Yeah.
Well, I told you that we'd try to keep this one a little bit shorter tonight, and we're hitting the hour mark right now, and I kind of covered everything that I had. Was there anything in particular that stands out to you over the last couple months or throughout your season that you want to talk about or anything?
No, I think we hit on everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I really did want to just focus on kind of the late season stuff because that's what was fresh on my mind. Wanted to go over some of that stuff with you. I'd received quite a few emails and questions and things on some of the late season tactics and stuff. So I will say this though, one last thing before we get off the phone here. Um, I don't know. Well, the next time I'll talk to you will be I'm coming to your scouting workshop. That'll be here the middle of February. And we'll talk then. But from now till springtime, for guys that are you know, really wanting to get after it next year, how do you think they should be focusing their efforts? If they got a couple days to get out and do some scouting, like what could be done right now, going into the
No,
spring?
I'd be out there pounding it, scouting, looking for bedding areas and such. If you got no snow or low snow, I'd be looking at the bedding from last fall. The bedding from rut in September and stuff. The primary bedding areas and stuff. And if you got deep snow, I'd be looking at bedding going on right now for next year when it's late season. Like you said earlier, try to see some of those patterns where they're hanging when they're in a certain area. You know, but anytime you're spending in the woods scouting is good time for you come next fall. I mean, that's the biggest problem I think most people have is they don't scout enough. I think you should be probably scouting about 3 times more than you hunt.
It's good exercise too, right?
Yeah,
there's
But
not much. It's easy to put a couple pounds on this time of year. Throw on some heavy boots and some heavy gear and go hit a
yeah,
couple miles
I
of
guess
woods, and you'll work up an appetite.
I guess it's kind of important the guy's in the right mindset too, though. I mean, just walking through the woods, stumbling around ain't going to do you any good either. You really got to, be focused and be trying to learn things and be trying to figure things out. You got to have
Mm-hmm.
that mindset.
Yeah. Cool. All right, Dan. Well, I'll talk to you here soon, and see if there's anything that you need from me before I head over here mid-February. But thanks for taking the time to do this tonight, and I'll get with you here in the not so distant future.
Sure, no problem.